So I would love to be able to talk to JD about how we can make things better for our economy. But I don't want to get involved in what Mark Carney's up to, and unless he tells me that's helpful to him.
Who cares?
Well, Mark Carney's also taken note of this. You mentioned it at the press gallery dinner.
I did apologize to the president. President was offended by the act.
We call it liberal racism because the Liberal Party's been in power for 10 years. And in that period of time, I think there's been a superficial approach to understanding the complexity of who people are. And so it sucks when there's like kind of a dishonorable aspect to this. As I mentioned earlier, I would be very happy to help Mark Carney with the trade negotiations in the U.S., do whatever I can.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. We have a fish on the line. We've got one on the hook. Jamil Jivani on CBC. Let's see how this goes. Jamil Jivani is one of my favorite MPs to watch on here. Let's see how the CBC does. Are they going to hack him up? Let's take a peek.
Thank you for talking to us. I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit about your Restore the North tour? Like, what is it and what have you been learning from it?
Yeah, we really set out to engage young people to better understand their priorities, what their views were on different issues, and try to create spaces where people didn't necessarily have to be conservative supporters to feel that they could be heard. I think we've been able to do that by going to these campuses and putting out online content and petitions and just trying to engage people in any way we can. My view is one of the biggest challenges in our country right now is a generation gap, and that people are experiencing our economy very differently depending on what stage of their lives that they're at. Mike Moffat, just the economist from Western University, just put out a report showing that young men under 35 are actually earning less than men over 65 for the first time in Canadian history. And I think those kind of data points paint a picture, but you also got to hear directly from people. And I also hope give them a pathway to get more involved in politics and make sure that their concerns are well represented.
And what are you hearing? Like, what are you learning on this journey?
A lot of what I hear are different expressions of anxiety about the future. Young people who are looking at the job market and unsure of how they're going to fit in or where their career is going to get started. Young people who want to start a family but don't know if they'll be able to afford it. Young people who want to buy a house and don't know if they're going to be able to afford that either. That's a lot of the feedback we get, and it manifests in different policy issues. In many cases, we hear about immigration, for example, where young people look at it and say, they're reading in the news people talking about the young Canadians like they don't want to work or they're not interested in the jobs that are out there, and being told that's why we need high levels of immigration. And they're looking at it like, well, me and my friends are trying our best and we're not able to get ahead. So you do hear it about different policy issues, but I think the underlying theme is anxiety about the future. And as a person I wouldn't call myself particularly young anymore, right? I'm in my late 30s. I try to kind of relate as much as I can, but also hopefully offer an informed perspective on how we can make things better without feeling like there's no hope for the future.
And what has the response been?
It's been great. Like, I've learned a lot. I really appreciate everybody who's come out to our events to tell us what they think. I think people, especially after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I think a lot of young people who watched him on YouTube wanted to feel that kind of free expression was something that was still going to kind of last and that it would be embraced in Canada as well. And we've been able to provide that opportunity. I think if people sort of watch our videos or go to our events, they'll find that it's a very civil Canadian exchange that we try to have. But a good one, right? Where I think people feel like they can say what they believe and they're not going to be judged, and someone who's a member of parliament is going to take them seriously.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I've wondered about you is, like, what compels you to take on the particular causes you've taken on? Like, I think you were the first out of the gate in your party to say you'd like to see the end of the temporary foreign worker program. You've been a voice for young men, even predating your time in elected politics. You're probably the most well-known anti-DEI advocate in Canada. What compels you to take on these specific causes?
A lot of it comes down to seeing a lot of people who need a hand up and need to be heard. And my observation is that there are a series of policies and sort of framings around issues that make it difficult for us to actually arrive to solutions. So if you take DEI for an example, I think most people across our country do not believe that skin color is a proxy for who needs help in our society. We can all think of people, whether they're battling poverty, addiction, homelessness, whatever it might be, who need help. And we, in our day-to-day life, we would never turn someone away because of what they look like or where their parents come from. And yet it is normal in a place like Ottawa, in the federal government and political culture, to say, well, certain people need help because of what they look like and certain people don't. Or that if you have a series of issues affecting young people, there can be a federal government department that's titled Women and Gender Equality. But if you raise, well, what about the young men who are also struggling and also need help, that's taboo or controversial. So I just try to sort of take my voice to the issues that I think need to be cleared so that we can arrive to better policies. That's my hope one day, that I will be able to help make policies in our country. As an opposition MP, I don't get the opportunity to do that as much as I wish, but I do hope one day that will come.
I want to ask you about this term I think you've coined, liberal racism. I know you have at least one T-shirt that says "End Liberal Racism."
Yeah.
What is liberal racism?
Well, Mark Carney's also taken note of this. You mentioned it at the press gallery dinner. We call it liberal racism because the Liberal Party's been in power for 10 years, and in that period of time, I think there's been a superficial approach to understanding the complexity of who people are. And it cuts two ways. One, it means that if you're a member of a minority community like me, it has now become normal for politicians and government officials to speak down to us, like we need special benefits in order to succeed. I don't believe that. I think we're as capable as anyone else. And on the other side, liberal racism also says that if you look like or share the ancestry of people who were part of the founding nations of this country, the British and French, that you can be openly excluded from job opportunities with the federal government or openly denied access to government programs. I just think that that's racism. And any conventional understanding of racism, I think, would agree, and yet it's become difficult to talk about. So we called it liberal racism to just sort of say to liberals, hey, you've got a problem, and we've got to be able to confront it. And it doesn't mean that racism only exists within the Liberal Party or only exists among liberals, but I do think they have to realize they've been in power for a long time, and a lot of their bad decisions have accumulated into really bad policy.
Oh, yeah.
What would you say to people who might come to you and say, oh, well, these policies are in place to help people get a leg up from communities that historically do not have the same advantages as, I guess, white people or just white people?
Yeah, what I would say is I just don't think race or skin color tells you whether someone needs help in our society or not. If you really want to help people, I think you look at their circumstances, you look at their income, you look at their living situation, and an honest look at our country would not suggest that someone's skin color tells you anything about what they're going through. I've been through a lot of challenges in my life, growing up with a single mother. I've grown up I was called illiterate when I was in high school. I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor. I've seen people in very tough circumstances, and not once did someone's skin color prevent them from being in a tough spot. So if you want to help people, I think you got to get directly to the issue. Make sure people have access to opportunity. Make sure we have a meritocracy where hard work gets you ahead, not just who you know, and make sure that if people are sick, they're taken care of. And I just don't believe it's ethical or right to say that because of what you look like, things you don't control, somehow that people can deny you a chance.
Well, I wanted to ask you, I mean, much of, I guess, what the public knows about your adult life is that, you've spent a lot of time working with young people, particularly racialized young people. So if DEI is not the solution to helping people who might be facing challenges, then what is the solution?
Well, I think it's investing in things that create social mobility, right? So quality education, where people actually learn how to read, write, and do math, which is a problem in many school districts across our country. It means creating an economy where people have access to opportunity. And it means that, and this is why the word meritocracy is so key, it means that we develop systems where you as an individual can perform well and show what you're capable of. When you don't have meritocracy, what you have is relationships and networks. So who your dad is or who your mom is might determine whether you get an opportunity. Meritocracy means whatever circumstance you're born into, you have a chance to work hard and elevate yourself in our society. To me, that's a big part of Canadian identity. If you ask people about their family history, almost everyone has a story of someone who started off in a tough spot. Maybe they just came to Canada and didn't have a house or didn't have an opportunity or a career, and yet they made something of themselves. That is who we are as a country, and I think we need to get back to that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever wonder in these conversations that you're having, if the cultural pendulum is going to swing too far away from the sort of post-pandemic identity politics issue set, and people will miss the nuance in your argument, and the zeitgeist could move closer to sort of the Nick Fuentes kind of brand of white nationalism? Like, is that something that ever comes up in your thinking about these issues?
Well, of course, I think it's important that we establish boundaries of what we think is acceptable and healthy dialogue, healthy ideas. It doesn't mean you censor people, but it doesn't mean you have to be clear about what you are arguing and what you stand for. I will credit CBC for actually putting out an article about Nick Fuentes recently. I think I'm the first politician in all of our country to talk about Nick Fuentes and make the point that racial resentment is bad regardless of what direction it goes into, whether it takes the shape of attacking Indigenous people, Black people, white people, anti-Semitism, whatever it is. I stand against it, and I have no desire to pretend that it's more complicated than that. There's a good way to treat people, and I stand up for that. I don't think my critics are always going to give me the benefit of the doubt. I don't think they're always going to hear everything the way that I intend for it to be heard. But I talk a lot, and I say what I think pretty openly. You could have whatever you might think of me. I don't think anyone could fairly say that I hold my opinions back. So I say what I believe, and I say it frequently. And I think if people hear me out, they will see I'm a believer that people deserve to be treated equally and fairly.
This is my last question on this subject, but I'm just wondering, have you ever been, some might say benefited, others, well, you might say harmed by DEI, and how has that informed your belief set?
Yeah, it's difficult to know how DEI policies at an institutional level affect you, because often people don't tell you they're hiring you or admitting you into a program because of what you look like. It's a policy that an institution has, right? So I don't know if I've benefited, but what I can say is where I feel like I've been strengthened as a person and as a man has been when someone says, we believe in you and we know you're capable. And every professor, every mentor, every pastor who has ever said that to me, that is where I think I've been the best version of myself. And when we go and talk to young people, that's the message I'm trying to deliver. I talk to very diverse rooms on a regular basis, and my message to them is, I believe in you. I know you're great, and I know you can do amazing things, and I want you to believe it too, and not think you need charity from someone else. You deserve an opportunity because you're good enough to get that opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
I want to ask you about conservatism in Canada. What, in your view, what motivates your conservatism? What makes you a conservative? How would you describe your political beliefs?
Well, my personal journey to conservatism really comes through my family background. I grew up without my dad. I think policies that support strong and healthy families are really important for people to grow up and feel good about themselves and to be confident enough to live up to their potential. I think the Conservative Party over time became the only mainstream political party in this country, at least at a national level, where you could talk about that openly without having to apologize for what I think is a truth, which is that kids need strong and healthy families. I think that's really the core of it. The other element of it, which I would say is a more recent development in our politics, is a confidence in the people of this country. We are the party that has offered, I think, a common sense critique of liberal immigration. My critique of liberal immigration comes from the fact that I believe in the young people of this country, and I want to see our government do everything possible to make sure the young people of this country can be great. And I think when you see a government offer a kind of logic that, well, if young people aren't going to take this job, we'll just bring someone else in. It feels like giving up on people. And I like the fact that conservatism has a real belief in the people who are from here and I think have a stake in the future of this nation.
Really interesting. I wanted to ask you about this. This week, Andrew Colvette, who was a close friend of Charlie Kirk's and is now hosting Charlie Kirk's program, was kind of asked, what is the future of MAGA conservatism in the United States? And he said affordability on housing, he said lower immigration, he said family, being able to have a family and get married. He said that is the future of the populist right. seems to be very similar to what we hear in Canada. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the issue set is the same in both countries?
Well, there is one major difference, I would say, in terms of what I talk about and what I see from Americans, regardless of what party they're from, which is healthcare. And to me, as a cancer survivor, obviously, Canadian healthcare is really important. So there are some important differences between the two countries. But generally speaking, I think there's a growing frustration with the status quo. The issues you mentioned around family policy, immigration, housing are things that uniquely affect people who are unhappy with their current position and feel like they are being held back by how politics, economic policy, things like that work. So I think what we're seeing in different countries around the world is a frustration that is shared by human beings. And because, Canada and the US share a border, maybe ours sometimes looks more similar culturally. But I will reiterate that I think the conservative tradition in Canada is unique, and I'm proud to be a Canadian conservative and not a conservative from anywhere else.
Cool. I have to ask you about JD Vance.
For sure.
What do you guys talk about do you talk to him regularly? What do you talk about?
I haven't talked to him a lot recently. When we have spoken, it's been about our fantasy football team, which we are going through the playoffs right now. So we did very well this season. But yeah, I mean, look, it's a difficult situation, just like the politics, right? Because if my party were in power and I could actually reach out to people in Washington and say, okay, can we try to resolve some of this trade dispute or get a deal going? There's a role for me to play. With the Liberal Party in power, there's not an obvious way for me to inject myself into that conversation. Now, I will say I have offered Mark Carney to help, and I really do believe I could help. I would love it if Mark Carney said to me, look, we need a multi-partisan, all hands on deck approach. Please go down to Washington. Here's the strategy and approach we're taking. See what you can do to help. I would love it if he asked me to do that. But out of respect for him as prime minister, I don't want to get involved. And frankly, we saw with the whole Doug Ford commercial debacle, what happens when there's not a good strategy in place that is in the best interest of the country. Mark Carney is getting a new ambassador named. Maybe that means a new strategy. Maybe that means there's a way that I can help. And, my constituents in Bowmanville, Oshawa North would like me to do that. But at the end of the day, the prime minister has to make that decision, not me. So I would love to be able to talk to JD about how we can make things better for our economy. But I don't want to get involved in what Mark Carney's up to, and unless he tells me that's helpful to him.
Oh, yeah.
We'll wrap it up right there, gang. Aaron, Canadian Looney, smash the like, hit subscribe. We cover Canadian federal politics right here. Come and get your opinion, your fill of Canadian federal politics right here. Ciao for now. Thank you for watching this video. Smash the like, hit subscribe. Check out one of the other videos floating around here. We'll catch you in the next one.